This happened to two very good friends of mine, but I was there helping them through it every step of the way. I asked their permission before posting, of course. All names have been changed. In 2014, I moved to my state's capital to live with my dad, so I could save some money before I moved out of the country. I needed a job that wouldn't be too physically taxing, because I was recovering from surgery on my shoulder. I found a job that was perfect. I was a street canvasser. I was one of those people who stands outside and waves you down, so you'll donate money to the ACLU, SPLC, or any other campaign we might be working on. The causes I was working to fundraise for were important, and I really enjoyed the versatility, the changing environment, and the friends I made. It was through this job that I met Monica and Terry. Monica worked with me and was married to Terry. We became very fast friends and would spend several nights a week together, just enjoying each other's company. We had a fourth friend in the mix, Rory, who would join us at our hangouts. He worked with Monica and me. We had all been pretty close friends for about 6 months when Rory was kicked out of his dad's house. He told us it was because his dad was a recovering alcoholic and addict. Rory also told us that his dad thought he wasn't respecting his house rules of no drinking. Monica and Terry agreed to let him stay with them until he could find a place of his own. They lived in a one-bedroom apartment, so he slept on a mattress on the floor in their living room. It was great having my 3 closest friends all living in the same place. I would head over to theirs after work. I had gotten a much better paying job at this time, but we would still have dinner, drink, play games, or whatever. We even built a blanket fort to play cards in once. We were in our 20s and 30s at the time, and to be honest, I would still do the same today. After about a month or 2 of Rory living with them, he was fired from the street canvassing job. We were fuzzy on the actual details, but it wasn't uncommon to be fired from there. If you didn't meet your fundraising quota 2 weeks in a row, you were let go, so we didn't push too much to find everything out. Rory did his best during this time to contribute as much as possible as he was staying with Terry and Monica. He would clean the apartment, cook dinner, buy them gifts, check the mail. It was an apartment complex where the mailboxes were a little out of the way. He would also download movies and TV shows that they wanted to watch. He honestly seemed like the ideal housemate. That was until one day, Monica and Terry found a little plastic bag on the floor of their bathroom. In that bag was some sort of illicit drug. It was either meth or crack. We don't know. We have no issues with recreational drug use. Who doesn't enjoy a joint now and again? But meth is pushing it a little far. Monica and Terry were very understanding and kind when they confronted him. They simply asked him to make certain that he doesn't leave anything around, since their cats love to eat plastic, and if they ate that, it would probably kill them. Rory apologized and promised to be more careful. This was the first red flag, and further evidence for why his father kicked him out. It wasn't just alcohol, it was also drugs. Then a few weeks later, Monica and Terry called me during my lunch break. They said, "We feel like there's something you should know, since we're all such good friends." Terry got a call about a credit card he recently applied for, only he didn't. We finally got them to tell us who the authorized user was on the card, and it was Rory. Monica didn't waste any time, getting straight to the point. "Seriously?" I said. I was utterly shocked that Rory, our Rory, opened a credit card in their name. They then told me that this was the second credit card company to call. The other one refused to tell them who the authorized user was. Then she told me that he borrowed their camera, which still had their honeymoon pictures on it. He hadn't been home in 2 days. We texted him asking him when he would be back, and he said he'd be back tomorrow. At that point, this was all the information we needed. I went back to work, and I couldn't shake the thought of Rory quite literally stealing their identity. I was heartbroken for them and angry at him. Why would he do this to 2 generous good people who opened their home to him? Monica and Terry had obviously decided to kick him out. I told them that since this really had nothing to do with me, I would wait for him to return and leave the moment he walked in. I waited in my car for them to finish their conversation with Rory, and they texted me when he left. Then I went straight back in. They were clearly and understandably upset, hurt, and angry. I hoped that this would be the end of it, but we'd only scratched the surface. The tendrils of Rory's filthy scheming and thieving actions did not stop with the 2 credit cards. The night they kicked him out, he was arrested for breaking into the office building where we had all worked. He was too high to get in and out fast enough, so the police caught him easily, and he was sent straight to jail. Monica and Terry began investigating the lengths to which he had gone in stealing from them. It turned out that when he was checking the mail, he was stealing the credit card applications sent to them and filling them out. When all was said and done, he had attempted to open 15 credit cards in their name. He succeeded in receiving several. One of them was a Macy's card, and he purchased a diamond ring so he could hawk it. They were receiving Amazon packages every day for about a week after he'd left. It was all purchased under Terry's name with a credit card he didn't know about. He had left everything he owned behind in their apartment, so I looked up property laws for our estate. After 2 weeks, if the tenant did not come to reclaim his property, the landlord could claim it as their own and do with it what they pleased, so we waited for 2 weeks. Remember all the cleaning he did for them? Well, once the 2 weeks were up, they opened the boxes next to his mattress. They discovered he had helped himself to Monica's birth certificate, her social security card, and a plethora of other things that he wanted for himself. We found evidence of other scams he had pulled, other people's private information, and so much more. He also left behind his Xbox, his TV, and some other gadgets. Terry and Monica kept what they wanted and sold what they didn't. He apparently had a storage unit under an alias that we suspected had a ton of stolen loot in it, but we were unable to gain access to that. It also turned out that the reason he was fired was because he was forging donations from people. If someone wanted to donate $10, he would change the 1 to a 4, or any other way he could scam more money. We earned a bonus once we surpassed a goal that was a percentage of the overage. He would even take his canvas shirt and clipboard home and canvas out of hours, accepting cash donations and people's credit card information for himself. Honestly, there's so much more to this story that I don't have the time or energy to write out. There's a lot more that came to light about Rory in the following months. Things he did, what his life was really like, etc. Monica and Terry reported it all to the police and handed over all the evidence they had, but I'm not so sure anything really came of it. The entirety of it all was truly shocking, eye-opening, and infuriating. We never heard from Rory again after the night Monica and Terry kicked him out. He never tried to get his things back, never apologized, nothing. I know this is a very anticlimactic ending, but it's just how it ended. There's no real closure for any of us involved, but especially Monica and Terry. The 3 of us have remained good friends, despite time and distance. I lived outside the US for nearly 5 years, and as bad as this all was, I would say it definitely brought us closer together. I also can't stress enough what great people these 2 are. Even now, they still help their friends out whenever they can. They still let their friends crash on the sofa for months at a time, if need be. I moved to a new city about 2 years ago, after the end of a bad relationship. It was both exciting and nerve-wracking for me. I needed a fresh start, and I found a short-term rental room to stay in until I got settled. It was a small room in the basement of a house. It wasn't much, but it was close to the subway and it was cheap. Not a bad place to start. Within a few weeks, I landed a job as a server at a nearby restaurant. The work was hectic, but I was happy to be working at all. I got along very well with my coworkers. Claire was one of the bartenders, and we hit it off immediately. We had only known each other for about a week when the topic of my living situation came up. Coincidentally, Claire had a spare room in her apartment that had just become available. She was eager to find someone to move in because she couldn't afford the place on her own. It seemed like the perfect solution for my housing situation. She offered it to me right away. I thought about it for about a day, and then the next time I was at work, I told Claire that I would take it. My 1 month at my current place was almost up, so the timing was also great. I moved in with Claire the following night. I was excited to build our friendship and finally feel at home again. The apartment was great. It was in an old historic building. I guess it used to be a house, or a mansion would be more accurate. It was split up into 6 apartments, and ours was half of the second floor. The ceilings were high, and the walls were beautiful sculpted wood. I had never lived anywhere like that before. Things were great for the first few days. We worked similar hours, so we would usually make dinner together. I felt that a good friendship had begun. However, there was one person in the equation that made me uneasy: Claire's boyfriend, Tim. From the moment I met Tim, I sensed something off about him. He seemed overly friendly and flirtatious when Claire wasn't around. I thought at first that he was just trying to be nice and welcoming, so I didn't say anything. I tried to push the thought out of my mind, actually. He really did worry me, though. As the days went by, Tim's advances towards me became more persistent and obvious. Despite my clear rejections, he didn't back down. At one point, he tried to hug me, but I totally rejected him. I could tell he was angry, but I didn't care. I needed to make a statement, and that was my way of doing it. After that, I avoided any encounters with Tim and hoped he would get the message to leave me alone. I thought everything was fine, but the next day, Claire came to me. Her eyes were filled with tears. Tim had fed her a twisted version of the events, claiming I had been the one pursuing him. I was taken aback, shocked that Tim had manipulated the truth to turn Claire against me. I denied the accusations vehemently, hoping that Claire would see through Tim's lies. But by the end of our conversation, I could tell that she didn't believe me. Our friendship was definitely on the rocks, and I didn't know what to do. I couldn't afford to move out, so I simply kept my distance from Claire as much as possible. It was hard though, because we lived and worked together, and like I said, we worked similar shifts, so we were home at the same time very often. It was awkward for the next week. I was hoping things would blow over though. One day, I was feeling sick. I was feeling really nauseous and had a giant headache. I called in sick for work and slept all day, but it got worse. The next night I was up vomiting, and I felt very dizzy. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced. After that, I visited the doctor, hoping for some answers. After describing my symptoms, the doctor recommended several tests. The results were both shocking and terrifying. I tested positive for antifreeze poisoning. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks, and I knew that Claire or Tim was responsible. I figured they were slipping it into my orange juice, or something else. It was really scary. I knew I could never go back to that place, so I went to the police instead. However, without concrete evidence, they couldn't do much. Claire denied it, and I'm sure she destroyed any evidence. I still think they should have been able to prove that she bought the stuff at some point. I guess there wasn't enough evidence to get a warrant for her credit cards or anything. I moved out of Claire's apartment as quickly as I could. I moved back into the basement room where I lived before. Quitting my job was the next step, despite the financial strain it would cause. I could barely afford to do this, but what other choice was there? I eventually found a new job and a new place, and things were looking up. It was a terrifying experience, and luckily, I've never seen Claire or Tim again. I heard Claire was fired from the restaurant not long after. I'm not sure if it had anything to do with what she did to me. I told some of our coworkers what happened between us, so I'm not sure if some people were uncomfortable being around her. If I really wanted to, I could probably find out, but to be honest, I really don't want anything to do with her. I don't even want to know. This happened in my first year at college. I lived in the on-campus residence for my first year. My building was old, but not in a good way. I think it was from the 1960s, so it was old enough to be a little run down, but not old enough to have much character. I didn't mind though. It was just exciting to be out of my parents' house. Everyone on my floor had a roommate. My roommate, Tarek, seemed a bit off from the start. He had a distant gaze, he rarely spoke, and didn't seem to have any interest in getting to know me. I tried to include him as much as possible, but it was useless. I tried to brush it off as mere quirks, but as the weeks went by, strange things began to happen. I'll just give a quick layout of our room. It was a long room, with the door at one end and a window at the other. My bed was next to the door, and Tarek's bed was next to the window. We both had a full-size desk next to our beds, so there was a fair distance between us when we were sleeping. One night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps pacing around the room. I rolled over and saw that Tarek was up pacing back and forth in our room. I pretended to be sleeping because I was too scared to say anything. Another night, I heard Tarek whispering to himself. His voice was filled with an eerie intensity. I didn't know what he was saying, or if it was just nonsense. I thought he might be talking in his sleep. That would be the best case scenario anyway. It didn't seem like that, though. I noticed right away that Tarek was into some weird witchcraft type stuff. He had several books on that kind of thing around the room. I wasn't too uncomfortable about it at first, but after the other things, it seemed even more creepy. Things went on like this for another month. I can't tell you how uncomfortable it was. I don't think we exchanged more than a few words the entire time. It came to an end in a really weird way. Tarek was actually kicked out of residence. It turned out that he had several large knives that were not allowed in our dorm. I never saw them, so I was as shocked as anyone. I still don't know how he got caught. I never told, but I guess someone saw him with those giant knives and got freaked out. I don't think I would have slept a wink if I knew he was there with an arsenal of weapons, in addition to everything else. The good news is that he was never replaced. I was the only one on my floor that year without a roommate. That had its ups and downs, but I can't complain. A lot of my friends were jealous. Nobody was jealous, though, when Tarek was around. In my early 20s, I shared an apartment with two other women, Josie and Sarah. It was a second-floor walk-up with 3 bedrooms and a nice big living room area. Life was fun, and we enjoyed our time together in the city. I had just moved in, having found the place online. Therefore, I didn't know them very well yet. We were getting along quite well, though. However, there was something creepy about Josie's boyfriend, Darren. He always made me feel uncomfortable with his slick and arrogant demeanor. I was relieved when he stopped coming over, and I assumed they had broken up. Since Josie and I weren't very close, I didn't ask her about it right away. She did eventually mention that they'd broken up, though. I didn't ask for any more details, and she didn't elaborate. As time passed, Josie and I became closer. About a month passed, and we started talking about our past relationships. Josie opened up about Darren. It turned out he had been arrested for robbing a store with a fake gun. He was also involved with drug dealing. I was shocked to hear that, even though I didn't like the guy. I wondered how much Josie knew about that when they were together. I was actually pretty disturbed that she let that guy into our home, if she knew what he was up to. I didn't press the issue, though. It was over and done. That's what I thought at the time, anyway. I put Darren out of my mind, and I didn't think of him for a while. One evening, while Josie and Sarah were out, I was alone in the apartment. I decided to watch a movie. I sat down on the couch with a blanket and a bowl of popcorn, and just enjoyed my time alone. As the movie played, I heard a faint knocking sound coming from somewhere in the apartment. My heart started racing, and I paused the movie to listen more carefully. The knocking grew louder, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Gathering my courage, I followed the sound to Josie's room. The door was slightly ajar, and the knocking seemed to be coming from inside. With trembling hands, I pushed the door open, and what I saw made my blood run cold. There, standing in the room, was Darren. I couldn't see his face, but I knew it was him. I recognized his jacket and his baggy pants. He had his back facing me, and his head was buried in the closet. He seemed to be looking for something, or just digging around. As soon as I saw him, I let out a scream. I immediately regretted it, because he turned around and saw me. I slammed the door shut and burst out the front door of the apartment. I called the police first, then I called Josie. When the police arrived, Darren was gone. Not surprising at all. I had no idea how he got in. The window was too high to climb, so I figured that he was there the whole time, probably for hours while I thought I was alone. When Josie finally came home, the truth behind the whole thing was revealed. She had started seeing Darren again, and he was in her room because she let him in the night before. He was in there the whole time while I thought I was alone. I had no idea he was there. I felt betrayed by my new friend. She knowingly exposed me to a dangerous person. She left me alone with that guy without any warning. I was beyond furious over it. I moved out not long after and never talked to Josie again.